Somewhere in West Texas, a small-town high school receiver drops a ball. Because of the drop, the team loses the game. The loss knocks the team out of the playoffs, so the coach is fired. Without that job, the coach's wife doesn't have enough money to buy groceries at the local Piggly Wiggly. The loss of business forces the supermarket to close, resulting in the loss of more jobs. With the rise in unemployment, the welfare system is taxed beyond repair. Bam! National depression. All because of one dropped pass. Sure, it sounds a little far-fetched, but this is a game where even a microscopic change can alter the outcome of a play. A game, a season, even a dynasty. And more often than not, it can all be traced back to a single moment in time.
Well, with the 8th pick in the draft, the Dallas Cowboys select.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop here because we've already missed one of those franchise-defining moments. Here's how it went down. Ryan Leaf or Peyton Manning? It was pretty much a coin toss to decide the first pick of the draft. Indy chose Manning, and San Diego was happy to have Leaf at number 2. 8 years later, Peyton Manning led the Colts to the promised land. Ryan Leaf was out of football, and the San Diego Chargers were floundering in mediocrity. But I digress. Here's what happened with the Cowboys' pick in that same round of the 1998 draft.
Well, with the 8th pick in the draft, the Dallas Cowboys select defensive end from North Carolina, Greg Ellis.
Ellis was a solid pick. 12-year NFL career, even made a Pro Bowl. The question wasn't who Dallas would choose, but who they didn't. For the Cowboys, the first domino was the road not taken.
Randy Moss was an incredible athlete. You know, you drool on measurables. You know, that's what scouts live for, the 6'4", the 218 pound, you know, the speed, the burst. I mean, there's a guy who was in the 4.3s. They'd throw routes to him across the middle. He'd snatch the football up the field, explosive. You knew you had a rare football player there when you watched him play.
He was a difference maker, a guy who could be a star, a guy who could take the Cowboys back to where they had been in the early 90s.
I think it's April or March, they bring in all the rookies. And Randy Moss is in the group of 20-some rookies there. And I remember I was in the weight room, and I remember seeing him in the weight room, and Jerry came up to me and said, "See the kid over here? If he falls to us," which was Randy Moss, he's pointing at Moss. He says, "If he falls to us, that's who we're getting."
Sounds like a no-brainer, right? The Cowboys have the 8th pick. If Randy's still around, you take him. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't quite that simple.
His talent was unquestioned. He was a once-in-a-generation type talent, but teams had to take a good hard look at him because of the off-the-field concerns.
If you want to build a lasting, successful team, you have to have the right kind of guy. And in 1998, I don't know him, and today he may be a paragon. But in 1998, Randy Moss was not the right kind of guy.
Randy had gotten a little sideways with the law a couple of times. But this was the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. Surely they could straighten out one bad apple. For the Cowboys to pass on a player like Moss, there had to be another reason.
It's because of me. To be honest with you, it was because of me and all the things that I had gone through and everything. And I know Jerry wanted to pick him, but because of some of the situations I've had off the field, now they were worried about, oh, you're putting those guys together, what would happen, what would become of those guys and everything.
Michael, then as now, was a big personality, also a lightning rod, and played the same position as Randy Moss. And now they've gone through some pretty tough times after the highs of the winning, and now Michael's in court, and he's got the mink coat, and sunglasses, and there's drugs, and it's the worst. It's the worst for building a brand and advancing a fan base. And now here comes this guy who plays the same position. Stories I heard said he came into town for his interview, and all he wanted to know was, where are Michael and Dion tonight? I want to go there. They had every reason in the world to stay away from that player.
When I came to work in Dallas, they used to video the draft meetings. And it was one of this video, if you could see it, would win an award for the drama and the passion and everything you wanted in a draft meeting. What scouts go through and coaches go through it every year working on the NFL draft. It's one of the most passionate pleas for a player that I've ever seen scouts start with. Jim Garrett, Jason Garrett's father, was huge on that. Walt Jaworski, all these guys. Jim Garrett even told Chan Gailey and Dwayne Painter, the coaches he was arguing against, he said, this is not the Boy Scouts, this is the NFL. And you could see that Jerry Jones was struggling with that. Jerry Jones is a risk taker. He understands. He had a passionate plea from the scouts. He had the coaches were pushing back away from it.
What always gets me is the same people who criticize Jerry Jones for taking chances on character issue guys later criticize him for not taking Randy Moss. So he couldn't win either way, but hindsight in this case, the pick that should have been made was obvious.
I was all about the rings and championships, and that was my mindset. And I thought, this guy, if we could second guess this thing, I guarantee I'd probably have another ring on my hand right now.
Randy's Johnny Manziel-like slide continued through the first round, as the next 12 teams failed to pull the trigger. Moss was finally drafted by the Minnesota Vikings with the 21st pick, a selection that would haunt the Cowboys for years to come.
Moss, not being a Cowboy, ended up biting Dallas in so many ways. One was when they played him.
He was always a Cowboy fan, always wanted to be here, and felt like he was going to be here. And because we didn't draft him, I think it was a chip on his shoulder, and he wanted to prove something every time he saw us.
True, Moss wreaked havoc on pretty much every defense he ever faced, but his special little vendetta against the Cowboys provided a ridiculous amount of highlight material for the Randy Moss Hall of Fame induction reel. Whether the jersey was purple, black, or, well, that other color, Moss never walked away from a Cowboys game without a victory. And Randy didn't waste any time easing into the vengeance business. It started the very first time he stepped on the field against the boys. The entire premise of a certain November holiday is to give thanks for what we have. And while Vikings fans celebrated their bountiful blessings, Cowboys faithful found little to be thankful for on that dreary Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, I was on the sideline actually for that Thanksgiving Day game. I remember him on just a few occasions running by me.
I've been a sideline reporter for 18 seasons now, and there are very few players that physically dominate the opponent, that have dominated the Cowboys. Randy Moss is one of those. Those games at the Metrodome and then the one at Texas Stadium where he averaged over 50 yards a reception. Unbelievable.
That game in '98 against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, I mean, he puts a stutter step move on the sideline, and and then he just takes off. So, I mean, they held him to 3 catches. He just scored 50-yard touchdowns every time. So.
You know, it wasn't just that Thanksgiving Day game. It was leading up to that and watching how he was just terrorizing the league. I mean, and seeing him just demoralize and just beat down good corners. I'm talking about really good corners and run by them. That was, you know, that's one thing, but then you see him in person and he does it, and he has these big days. And we saw him on Thanksgiving Day, man, and he just, you know, it wasn't a surprise to me. And we didn't have the personnel to handle him. And he just ran by us the entire game.
Cunningham runs a draw to Smith, flips it back for a flea flicker. Cunningham deep down the right side. Moss all alone at the 10, catches it and steps in for the Minnesota touchdown.
The Cowboys made it through the '98 season with a respectable 10-6 record and without Randy Moss. And surprisingly, the '99 season was looking even better. And a big reason for the team's success wore number 88. Yep, that same 88. Sure, he had his flaws, but they don't hand out those golden jackets to just anyone.
Year after year after year, he was among the league leaders in receptions and yards and touchdowns, and he just was a great player. But I'll argue to the day I die, his impact was far greater than that. And he was one of the most natural leaders I've ever been around. He, as much as anybody else on those teams, really set the tone each and every day for how those teams were going to operate. A lot of great players, a lot of great leaders, a lot of guys who led different ways. But Michael Irvin was always out there. He was always out in front and always providing the energy and the emotion for those football teams. And everybody felt it, everybody respected it, everybody followed it.
Michael Irvin was the catalyst. He was that guy that was on the opposite side of the ball, that leader that when things got rough and things weren't looking good, you could always hear Mike, you know, his voice getting the offensive lineman going or whatnot. And he was the standard on that offensive side of the ball. I mean, guys really followed him because they were with him. They saw his work ethic and whatnot, and defensively as well.
He had a way of communicating not only with the guys on offense, not only the offensive linemen, but the defensive linemen and any rookie that came in. He was like the Pied Piper, and guys would follow him to the end of the earth.
You know, you watched him elevate everybody else's game. He didn't let anybody take any shortcuts. And that was what's so impressive about watching him. You're thinking, wow, I've heard this about this guy. Everything they said about him was absolutely true.
On October 3rd, 1999, Dallas strolled into the vet looking to extend their undefeated record to 4-0. But late in the first quarter, disaster hit the Cowboys.
There's a Cowboy down. I couldn't see what the deal was, but Michael Irvin hasn't gotten up yet. That looks bad. And the fans who are in an ugly mood here when things are going well are cheering Michael Irvin's injury.
And I think it was their way of sort of blowing off some of their frustration. It's like, aha, look at that Cowboy. He's down. We don't have to worry about Michael Irvin the rest of the game. Little did they know they weren't going to have to worry about him ever again playing for the Dallas Cowboys.
So not only do you lose his impact on the field, the production that he had, you lose that leadership, that emotional leadership, that energy, that juice that he brought every day. And that has a big impact. When it's there, you feel it, you follow it. When it's not there, you feel it as well. And that certainly had a big impact on those teams.
When that happened in Philadelphia, that was the end of the Dallas Cowboys as we knew it, in my opinion. We were trying to hold some things together. When Michael was laying on that turf, that was the end to me. It's a cliche thing to say, the heart, the soul. He really was. I mean, he made everybody so accountable for their own play. But when he was gone, then we were the ship without the rudder. We were trying to find land and we really couldn't.
Michael's career-ending injury left a huge hole in the heart of the Cowboys, and a pretty big void on the field, too. Just 4 years after the glory of Super Bowl 30, the 1999 team could only muster an incredibly ordinary 8-8 season. The Cowboys were desperate to find a suitable replacement for Irvin.
We're trying to extend Troy Aikman's career. We're trying to find a way to give him another weapon.
We can build some other guys around it. Well, you have to get someone Troy is comfortable with, that we can make big plays with, and then we can still piece this together and maybe go and grab one more title.
We didn't have a guy on the outside that could really stretch the defense.
Well, they realized why the season ended in '99 the way it did. They just didn't have a lead wide receiver. They didn't have that guy. Now, they signed Rocket Ishmael, and he was okay, but he wasn't a number one guy. He was kind of a toy receiver.
Rather than take their chances in the draft, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys decided that a proven NFL veteran was the way to go. And if he happened to run a 4.2 40, that would be fine too.
Well, Joey Galloway was a guy that was probably a poor man's Randy Moss. I mean, because he could go. I mean, without a doubt, he had that top-end speed.
Michael Irvin was a tall, muscular, just like a thoroughbred, like a racehorse. He was that type of a player. Joey was a shorter, more compact, quicker player. Michael, being tall and linear, longer, took him time to get moving. Joey was explosive from the snap.
Joey wasn't a guy that ran a lot of crossing routes, ran the deep 4 routes across the middle and you can move him around. He was one of those guys that were on the outside and he would run by press coverage. That's who Joey Galloway was.
And so they ended up making the trade for Joey Galloway. Now, I remember thinking, oh, okay, if you can get him for a first, okay, fine. If you can get him for maybe a first and a third, okay. But it came down, they gave up 2 first-round picks for a wide receiver. Are you serious?
That's what I love about Jerry. It's now. I'm not worried about tomorrow till tomorrow. Right now, I need to try to do this right now.
You know, Joey Galloway was good. I thought he was good, but not for 2 first-round picks. And that's how desperate they were, because you should never do that. I'm not sure anybody short of a quarterback is worth 2 first-round picks.
You know, there's deals you make. That one I didn't expect the 2, and I didn't feel like that was the price of poker. I asked Mike Holmgren about that later. I said, Coach, many years. He says, I was really only expecting the first one. So that part of it was very, very tough.
Dallas opened the 2000 season with a brand new toy. And those 2 first-round picks didn't seem too unreasonable when Joey pulled in his first touchdown as a Cowboy. But that warm, fuzzy feeling didn't last too long.
And then the worst possible thing could happen. The first game of the season, they're getting beat. They've got the starter still in the game. It's late, and he tears his ACL.
So now you don't have your draft pick, and you don't have your primary threat that you were going to build the offense around.
You want to put on a brave face and say, oh no, it's early in the season, we'll keep fighting, we'll keep doing it. Right then and there, though, the one guy that we thought was going to be our weapon, our Troy Aikman, he's going to be accurate, he's going to hit him a lot of touchdowns, a lot of things, a lot of positive things. It was laying right there on the field that day at Texas Stadium. And that itself, I remember walking out of the stadium, my shirt was completely drenched with sweat, my tie was on the other side of my shirt, and I knew right then and there that we were in some trouble.
Other than being like president, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys is pretty much the highest office in the land. Don Meredith, Craig Morton, Roger Staubach, Danny White, Troy Aikman. For the first 40 years of the Cowboys' existence, one of these guys has been on the field in every season but one. I'm giving you this information now because it helps put the gravity of this next event in perspective. Here's the clip.
I saw Danny White retire, Tom Rafferty, Ed Jones. Forget me here because it's going to be a lot harder. Michael Irvin, Jay Novacek, Daryl Johnston. And you watch it and you think that your time will never come. And my time's come. And today I announced my retirement from the National Football League and the Dallas Cowboys.
Troy Aikman was the man. He was everything you could ever ask for in a quarterback. 6 Pro Bowls, 3 Super Bowl titles, a Super Bowl MVP, and all the intangibles you could ever dream of.
He was the franchise. You can talk about Emmitt Smith, you can talk about Michael Irvin, you can talk about the offensive line, but if you don't have the quarterback, and I learned that about the NFL over those years, then you ain't got anything. And he was so steady, so consistent, so accurate. And on the field, he was the guy. He was the leader.
When it was time to play, when the lights really came on, the lights are on every game, but when they are shining the brightest, he's one of the greatest playoff quarterbacks of all time. When he retired, no quarterback in the history of the NFL had had more victories in a decade than he had in the 90s.
Of course, the Cowboys had lost quarterbacks before. It happens to every team. The difference was, this time, there just wasn't anybody to step in and take his place.
When you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback, and in that case that you really weren't prepared to lose, we didn't think Troy was gonna quit at that point in time. I mean, he still had ability to play the game and play at a very high level.
We had not done a good job of preparing for a backup quarterback. We were probably guilty thinking Aikman would play forever.
Just 20 days after Troy Aikman's retirement announcement was the 2001 NFL Draft. That's right, less than 3 weeks to find the next franchise quarterback. It was about this time that people started noticing that the Cowboys' list of unfortunate situations was growing at an alarming pace.
It was like, how do all these things happen? You lose your top wide receiver for his career. You trade 2 first-round picks for a wide receiver. He gets hurt the first game of the season. Now he comes back in 2001, but now you need a quarterback because no one anticipated Troy's career ending. Now you don't have a first-round pick. And then when it's time to pick, the quarterback class of that year, it was nothing. It was non-existent. There was 2 quarterbacks in that class.
Those 2 guys were Michael Vick and Drew Brees. The list after that got pretty sketchy. But there was a kid from Georgia that had some heads turning around the Cowboys draft room.
Quincy was a fantastic athlete, a quarterback who was a little bit ahead of his time in terms of an athlete at the position, He had an unbelievable skill set. He had an NFL arm. He had the ability. There's no doubt about it.
This was a guy who had success in college, was athletic, was a different sort of quarterback than Troy Aikman, was more mobile.
That was sort of that era there where you were starting to use quarterbacks that could use their legs to help them win. And they were looking at, well, let's take a shot at this guy.
This is kind of becoming a recurring theme. But not unlike the Moss ultimatum, there was another side to the Quincy Carter coin.
There were question marks right from the start. You know, there was rumors coming out of Georgia that he had locker room problems. Guys didn't like fouling him.
I was working on the pro personnel side of it, and I was talking to people, other scouts in the pro departments from their team. That's one of the great things about Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, is they're like, hey, find out, give me some information, try and dig a little bit and find some things. I couldn't find anybody that was really talking about Quincy Carter in a positive light. Too many things were about, well, did you check this? Did you check this? Or did you hear about this?
Red flags were starting to pop up all around Quincy Carter. But you know what they say about desperate times. And as the clock wound down on the Cowboys' second-round pick, it was decision time.
The Cowboys were to a point where they needed a quarterback. They needed a guy that could come in and be the one. And Jerry wanted it to be Quincy.
I remember the meeting well. Scouts made their opinion, and then they cleared the room of the scouts. And then you had Jack Riley, Wade Wilson, Dave Campo, Larry Lacewell, Steven, and Jerry in a room making the decision. And then we came back, and the tag was on the board there in the second round. And we all knew right then and there, when we looked up, we're like, okay, we just need to move on to the next guy. We said our piece. The owner, general manager made his call. We marched step, let's go.
Hey, Quincy.
Yes.
This is Jerry. You're a Dallas Cowboy.
Thanks, Mr. Jones.
They take Quincy Carter, and there was a lot of discussion of, how could you take that guy? You could have got him in the third round or the fourth round.
We needed a quarterback, and we'd done a lot of work on him, and you saw this fantastic athlete that could run, he could throw, he could do a lot of things that were a little different then. And maybe we took him a little bit higher than we should have.
Did I like Quincy as a person? Yeah. Did I think Quincy was a starting quarterback? To be drafted that early in the second round? No way. No way. And that was hard to accept. As a player that was spoiled and had already had 3 rings and was looking for another 4th ring, the writing was on the wall. We were just average personnel-wise. I tell you, back then it was a demoralizing time because the personnel that we were bringing in, whether it be Quincy Carter or Dwayne Goodrich or and the list goes on and on. The guys couldn't play. I mean, let's call it what it was. They just could not play. And I still remember walking out there in the OTAs in the off season and watch Quincy throw the ball and think, are you serious? This is where we are.
And he really wasn't that accurate. He was all over the place. Then he gets hurt, and then they go through the Rolodex of quarterbacks that year. I think they had 4 starters. I think they set a record for how many starting quarterbacks you have in one season.
Quincy did show some promise over the next couple of seasons. But in 2004, due to some extracurricular activities, the Cowboys thought it was time to make a move.
I'll never forget, ironically, it was my birthday here in Oxnard. I remember Todd Williams knocking on my door saying, hey, we just cut Quincy. It was 7:30 in the morning. I'm like, what? We cut Quincy? I thought he was our quarterback.
And then then there's no pretense anymore. You know this is no longer a championship team. You're not making moves to try to hold on and catch lightning in a bottle. This is it. You have to move forward. But now you're moving forward without a quarterback.
We spent a lot of years after that looking at shortstops and third basemen and backups and all kinds of guys.
It took a while to get through the politics of the quarterback, issues here. You drafted Quincy, he needs to play. You signed Chad Hutchinson for all this money, he's got to play. You signed Drew Henson, he needs to play.
We were going through all these quarterbacks. We never got fortunate enough to hit on a Joe Montana in the 3rd round or hit on a Dak Prescott in the 4th round. We never got to that point where we could, we were focusing on so many other positions too.
From 1999 to 2006, the Cowboys wandered through the wilderness of the NFL. Only 3 winning seasons in 8 years. And you can bet that there were plenty of images running through the minds of blue-blooded Cowboys fans, remembering what was and wondering what could have been.
You'd never had a prolonged period where you were searching for somebody. You always had the guy you either knew or you were pretty sure was your next quarterback.
And that fortune can't last forever. And it ran out there 2001, 2002, till they got to Tony Romo midway through the 2006 season.
I know that blue period seems very, very long for Cowboys fans, but it could have been a whole lot longer. It really could have if you hadn't hit it with Tony Romo.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, so here's a quick review. The Cowboys ruled the 90s, but as the decade was coming to a close, passed on the opportunity to draft one Randy Moss. The following year, Michael Irvin suffered a career-ending injury, which left the Cowboys without a number 1 receiver. In an effort to replace Irvin, the Cowboys traded 2 first-round draft choices for Joey Galloway. Unfortunately, due to injury, Galloway played only 1 game the following year, and at the end of that season, the great Troy Aikman announced his retirement from football. Without a first-round pick, the Cowboys were forced to take the best available quarterback in the 2001 draft, Quincy Carter. And for the next few years, the numbers 5 and 11 became all too familiar for Cowboys fans across the globe. That pretty much sums it up. The subsequent 10-year-long demise of the Cowboys' winning ways was very real. But is it fair to blame that decade of disappointment on a single event in history?
I am Eric Barnes, and I am professor and chair of the philosophy department here at SMU. I think there's a very basic human urge to understand the world and to understand why things happen. And if I had to pick the number 1 reason why people come up with theories, it would be so that the world becomes an intelligible place in some sense, so we are less cut off from it and we can connect to it by understanding it. Fitting theories to known facts can provide good explanations of what has happened, but there are many ways in which fitting theories to the facts can go wrong. For example, anytime you're trying to prove causation, there are certain pitfalls to be wary of. So you know that A happened, and you know that B followed that. And it might be tempting at that point to jump to the conclusion that A caused B. But for obvious reasons, that might not be true, right? It might not have been A that caused B. It might have been something connected with A. There was a time when doctors thought that coffee drinking caused cancer, because in fact the percentage of cancer among coffee drinkers was greater than among non-coffee drinkers. But then, of course, it turned out that coffee drinking was linked to smoking. And it was really the smoking that was causing the cancer. So if your theory is the non-drafting of Randy Moss caused the poor seasons for the Cowboys, you just want to be careful that there isn't something connected with the non-drafting of Randy Moss that might really be causing the problem. The theory is not implausible. Right. It may well be true that had they drafted Randy Moss, he would have continued to play as well for the Cowboys as he had for other teams. It may be that when you look at all the data, there's no particular reason to worry that he would have gotten involved in off-the-field issues or that the Cowboys were making bad decisions. These would all be things to look into in the way of supporting that theory. And if you could establish good evidence, right, that there was no particular reason to think that he wouldn't play as well for the Cowboys as for the Vikings, and then you've got what starts to look like a pretty good theory. You just want to be sure you do all your homework on those questions.
The very great baseball announcer, John Miller, has a theory. He calls it the fallacy of the preordained hit, which says that if a guy's on first and he's thrown out stealing second, and on the next pitch the guy gets a base hit, the announcer invariably says, as does everybody in the ballpark, if he hadn't been thrown out at second, that guy would have scored. And the fallacy is that hit that guy just got is preordained. Because if there's a guy on second, the pitch selection is different. The defensive alignment is different. Everything's different. What I love about that is that it is so applicable to football. I use it all the time. The fallacy of the preordained hit is that we knew Michael Irvin was going to be injured when Randy Moss wasn't drafted. We knew Joey Galloway was going to be injured and never really have the chance to play with Troy Aikman, and that's why it was a mistake. So the fallacy of the preordained hit makes everything in sports and in life real easy.
It's been almost 20 years since Dallas passed on Randy Moss. The funny thing is, so did 19 other teams. So, why is this story about the Cowboys?
Before this latest run, I felt that they were the Kardashians of the NFL. People were always talking about them, whether they were in the playoffs or not, a disproportionate amount for where they were competitively at the time.
The Cowboys aren't like every other team. And I don't mean that with the kind of arrogance that would make Tex Schramm proud. And I certainly don't mean it to demean any other team. But more people passionately hate the Dallas Cowboys than hate any other team in the NFL. There's some people who don't like the Raiders. Most of them are Chiefs and Broncos fans. There's some people who don't like the Packers. Most of them are Bears and Vikings fans. Now today, a lot of people don't like the Patriots. That's just because they're winning all the time. Nobody hates anybody in the NFL with the depth and breadth and passion that people who hate the Dallas Cowboys hate the Dallas Cowboys. And because of that, how many years has Randy Moss been retired? And we're still having the conversation.
In 1995, the Cowboys were on the mountaintop of the NFL. But by '98, the snowball had definitely started to gain some downhill momentum. The question is, could the addition of Randy Moss have helped the Cowboys bridge the gap between the good times and bypass years of disappointment? Or would he have just been another casualty in a predestined fall from grace? The fact is, we'll never know. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from the past. In 2010, the Cowboys were presented with a decision eerily similar to what they experienced back in '98. This time, Dallas traded up to take a then-troubled receiver. I think we can put an X in the lesson learned box for that one. Oh yeah, and in 2016, the Cowboys realized that there are two sides to a domino. And sometimes, when you least expect it, that domino may just fall right in your lap.
Yeah, he was a combination. He was. I call him the perfect storm as far as defense goes. He was the perfect storm. He's gonna beat you with speed and he's catching everything you throw to him.
If you parallel his career, he would have fit right in with all the great 88s and all the great receivers that they've had in the past. I mean, he would have fit right in, and him and Irvin could have played together a couple years, and Troy might have extended his career and everything like that as well.
Off the field issues, yeah. I mean, it was a big thing. I think they were dealing with not just Mike Irvin, but several other players on their team, and to bring in another bad apple, I think would have been a lot of backlash, not only from from the NFL itself, but from fans around the league.
You don't have a quarterback to lead the offense, you're not going to get anywhere. Defense can't do everything. You have to score points. So if you don't have a fundamental leader that's out there that's working, you're not going anywhere. That's the start.
One receiver can never make an NFL team, so I definitely wouldn't place the Cowboy struggles in the early 2000s due to not taking Randy Moss. One guy can't make a team.
It's only merit if you learn something from him. Other than that, man, it's just it's conspiracy theory. We can go at it all day long and with the what ifs, but you never know. Yeah.